Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel. Welcome to the Dice Tower, and today I want to talk a little bit about expansions. Later this week, we're posting a list that we have pre-recorded, well, almost a couple months ago now, about our top 10 board game expansions. And expansions are a really cool thing. I love expansions for games. If you love a game, an expansion adds more stuff to it, brings more to the table. I remember as a kid, I played Cosmic Encounter, the original Cosmic Encounter from Eon, and reading the little book in the back that said there was expansions, and it kind of blew my mind that a game came and there was more stuff for that game. Never was able to get any of those. It never happened. And I always wanted to, though, and I was always curious. I think the first expansion I ever got was for Hero Quest. We played through Hero Quest, and I heard there was expansions, so I went and hunted down one of them. Nowadays, expansions come out all over the place. For a while, there was, a game would have to be good and sell well to get an expansion. But now, since many games are on Kickstarter, they're released simultaneously with expansions, which I don't think is the best idea because I think expansions are particularly good when they are additions to a game rather than subtractions. And what I mean is, many times someone will design a game and someone will go, no, this shouldn't be in the game. That's too much. So you take that out, and then you add it in later as an expansion. This famously happened with Catan from Klaus Teuber, where Seafarers and Cities and Knights and even other whole games where it was a big thing and it streamlines the game down. But subtractions always worry me a lot when you get a Kickstarter game and there's a ton of stuff and all these expansions adding and all this stuff. You're like, well, what was the original intent? But I think expansions are best when the game is out there. It has millions, thousands, hundreds of playtesters. People can see and say, man, I wish it had more of this. There's this problem with the game, whatever. And then the expansion will do better. Now, what kind of expansions exist for games? And I think they can be cut down into different categories, whether or not the publisher calls them these categories or not. We have the game patch. This was something people used to make fun of Fantasy Flight games during the aughts, in the 90s and the aughts about this, because it was like, hey, they publish a game, and then the expansion will come out because there was a problem with the original game, and this fixes that problem. I don't think this is the best reason to make an expansion, but we'll come back to this later. More stuff. More stuff. I mean, this is a lot of expansions. They add more things. Oh, you have an expansion with this game comes with 4 factions. Here's 2 more factions. And adding to more stuff, we have more players. Hey, you want to play 5 players? You want to play 6 players? This expansion allows you to do that. Maybe even sometimes less players. You can now play a lot of expansions, say, now with solo play. Modular. A lot of expansions come in, they're like, here's 5 modules, plug one of them or more of these into each other, and you can use as many as you want. And then finally, expansions that completely change a game. And we're talking a cooperative game is now a competitive game, or vice versa. Whatever. Like this game does this, and now we're adding an economic part to this game, adding to it. Now, when we talk about expansions, we can't deny the fact that I'm Tom Vasel, and I'm a board game reviewer, and so this is going to affect me to some degree. Like for someone who plays a lot of different games, there are expansions as critical. I'm not playing the same game dozens and dozens and dozens of times, so I don't need more variety for that game. I've always said I'd rather have an expansion for a game I love than a new game. Not 100% sure that's accurate, but maybe I'm just someone who shouldn't be even worried about expansions since I am focused on playing new games all the time. But I don't know that I've changed that much because I was always someone who looks for the experience of a new game. Now, an expansion can give you that experience for a new game, and I'll tell you what, there are some expansions which I think are critical or needed. They make the game so much more fun. And again, our top 10 list that's coming this Thursday will talk a bit about why I think these expansions are fantastic and necessary. To me, I'll always play with them. But we do have to take that into account, right? That's something that I have. If you have one game, an expansion for it will hopefully be amazing. Although there are a lot of bad expansions out there. Things that I'm not interested in expansions. I'm not interested in any expansion that makes the game longer and more complicated. There's some exceptions to that, but a good example here would be Catan. Catan has many expansions, but the first 2 expansions, other than the Seafarers expansion and Cities and Knights, and the 5 to 6 player expansions. 5 to 6 players expansions made the game longer by quite a bit. And some people have really disliked the game because they loved it at 4 players. You add in 6 players, you're like, wait, this game that is now taking double the time. Yeah, I think that's a bad thing. Cities and Knights added tons of complexity and completely changed the game over, which some people really do like, but for me, I was happy with the game as is, and Seafarers just gives you a little more, which is what I enjoyed. I don't know that I'm interested in increasing game setup. You know, here we set up the game, and then we got to go here and then set up the expansion. And in fact, as a side note, I think if you do make an expansion for a game and you have an expansion book, I would prefer if you just redid the entire setup for the game there. Instead of saying, when you do this step, do this, when you do this step, do this, so that I'm having to look back and forth between books. I'm not interested in expansions that make the game much more difficult to teach, and games with player aid issues. We laugh about Small World. Small World was a fun game with a lot of different factions, and then each expansion came with its other player aid, and pretty soon I was like, okay, which of these 4 player aids am I looking at to find the faction? I don't know if I love that. So what do I want in an expansion? I want an expansion. So these are things I look for when I play an expansion, because I do like expansions. I want something that's easy to add or subtract. You got cards, put an easy to see icon on them so that I can pull them out of the deck and put them in if I want to. Have containers or whatever, you know, a way to clearly say these components are for the expansion, these are not. This is something that a lot of Kickstarters have a problem with nowadays, with new Kickstarters that are released simultaneously, sometimes with expansions in the same box, and it's difficult to figure out how to take everything out and put it back in. I want to be able to plug and play the expansion as easily as possible, or even better, it's so easy that you just stick it in and never take it out. The rules teach. I don't want the rules teach to be overly difficult, and if it adds more to that, I'm not a fan of the expansion. I want it to where it doesn't change the tenor of the game. Now, this can happen. I just played Viticulture World, which takes viticulture and makes it a cooperative game, and that worked, and I'm happy. But I'm not looking for that. You know, you tell me, oh, this takes this game in a completely different direction. I don't want that. What I want is the more stuff, the more variety. There's 8 player powers. This expansion adds 8 more. You know, there's 20 technology cards. Here's 6 more that come in this expansion. That sort of thing is fun. Even if the more stuff is, here's a new resource, and it doesn't add too much complexity, that's what I'm looking for. I want an expansion that rekindles my love for the game. That's what the Dominion expansions do for me. There's more stuff, and I play them like, oh, that's right, I forgot how much I love Dominion. I add these expansions, and I get to play it more. Dune Imperium added different sets of things on the board, but every time I went back and played with this expansion, I'm like, I forgot how much I love this game, and that expansion kind of rekindled my love there. And then look, the ones that fix issues with the games, the patches, I don't mind that. And I'll tell you why, because you don't always notice things as when you do this. Everyone's like, you shouldn't have to release a patch. I agree, you shouldn't have to. But if the game's out there and it does have small issues, I'm happy with minor things that change it. I'm happy with an expansion for Dune Imperium that lets us wipe the cards and put new ones out. I'm happy for the Ticket to Ride ticket pack that adds more tickets so that some of the cities that weren't getting as much use are now involved in the game. I'm happy when the expansion has a rule that fixes a problem that we thought, that's kind of an issue. I like that sort of thing. Now, I don't know that I like when you are forced to buy them because the game is so bad without them. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about little things that are fixed. I kind of enjoy that. Anyway, that's what I'm looking for in board game expansions. That's just me. Other people are going to probably have very different opinions and thoughts on it. Let me know yours in the comments. What do you like in expansions and not like in expansions? And then join us this Thursday as we talk about our top 10 expansions. Until then, I'm Tom Vasel, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.